He was chained to a tree hidden deep in the forest. His fur was matted with blood, his body trembling, and on his side a tumor so large it made him stumble when he tried to move. Two hikers thought they were following elk tracks. What they found instead changed everything. No one could explain how a grizzly bear was left to die this way. Forgotten, broken, barely breathing. But the story doesn't end in sorrow, because what happened after the rescue, the healing, the friendship, the impossible transformation will stay with you forever. This is not just a story about survival. It's a story about what it means to fight for life, even when everyone else gave up. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. We bring you real, emotional stories that remind us how deep compassion can go, even in the wild. Now, get ready, because this story will break your heart and then help put it back together. It was supposed to be a weekend hike. Maya Turner and Liam Rodas, two friends from Seattle in their early 30s, were deep into the Cascades for what they called their digital detox weekend. No phones, no distractions, just trees, mountains, and clean air. They had planned to follow an old, disused trail that Liam found on a forestry map. "No one's been here in years," he said excitedly. "It'll be wild." He didn't know how right he was. By the second afternoon, they were off the map. Snow still clung to the shadows between trees. Birds had gone quiet. Then they heard something. Not a growl, not a roar, a moan. Long, weak, guttural. Liam stopped. "You hear that?" Maya nodded. "Animal." They followed the sound carefully. Each step closer, the air felt heavier, and then they saw it. A clearing, a rusted chain wrapped around a tree stump, and at the end of that chain, a massive grizzly bear. He was collapsed on his side, ribs heaving, fur covered in mud and dried blood. His left eye was swollen shut. One of his paws was raw and infected. But what struck them most was the growth, a grotesque mass the size of a football bulging from his upper ribcage. Maya gasped. Liam dropped his pack. "Is he dead?" The bear stirred slowly. His head rose an inch, then fell. Still alive. Maya, trembling, stepped forward. The chain rattled as the bear tried to move just enough to flinch in fear. But he didn't growl. He didn't lash out. There was nothing left in him to fight. Liam took out his phone even though there was no signal. "We need help. We can't leave him here." "Who would do this?" Maya whispered. "Who chains a bear out here to die?" They didn't know it yet. But what they just uncovered wasn't only an abandoned animal. It was evidence of something much darker and much more human. The bear, later named Harlan, blinked slowly at them, not as a predator, but as a creature too exhausted to be afraid. And in that moment, Maya knew we're not leaving him. Not until they found a way to save him, even if no one believed them, even if no one came, even if it meant walking into something much bigger than they ever imagined. Maya stood frozen. She had worked with animals before, volunteered in shelters, even once helped a veterinarian stitch up an injured stray dog. But this was something entirely different. The bear lying before her was broken, not just tired or hurt, dying. And yet when she crouched near the end of the chain and looked into his one good eye, she didn't see rage. She saw resignation. The growth on his side was impossible to ignore. Nearly the size of a volleyball, the tumor bulged from under his left front leg, pressing hard against his ribs. The fur over it had thinned to nothing. His skin was stretched and raw, darkened with a patch of dried blood and flies buzzing relentlessly around it. When Harlan tried to adjust his position, his body trembled, and a strained whimper escaped his throat. Liam knelt beside Maya and whispered, This is torture." There was no phone signal in the clearing, so they hiked a mile uphill, then another, until Maya's phone finally lit up with a single bar. She immediately dialed the local wildlife rescue number, followed by the National Park hotline. The first response, "Are you sure it's a real bear?" Then, after explaining again and again, came the next insult. "A grizzly chained? That doesn't happen. You must have misidentified it. Maybe it's a large dog or livestock." Liam grabbed the phone. "Listen, I'm sending a photo right now. Check your inbox. If this doesn't convince you, we're going to the press." They sent 3 images, the full view. The bear collapsed, the rusty chain cutting into the tree bark. A close-up of his eye, dull, tired, half-closed. The worst one, the tumor visibly protruding, slick with infection. It took less than 2 minutes for the callback. A ranger from the Washington Wildlife Response Unit confirmed that a rescue team would be deployed, but it might take a day to reach that remote area. And in that day, Heron might not make it. That night, Maya and Liam stayed by the bear. They kept a small fire going at the edge of the clearing, not too close to frighten him, but enough to keep wild predators away. Every couple hours, Maya would speak softly to him, letting her voice carry across the cold air. "I know it hurts, but you're not alone anymore. Just hold on." Sometimes he blinked. Once in the middle of the night, he tried to stand. His legs gave out. He collapsed again, muzzle hitting the dirt with a quiet grunt. Liam wanted to cry, but he didn't. He just walked over, took off his jacket, and covered the bear's head gently. "You're not dying in the dark," he said. "Not like this." Dawn came. So did the sound of rotor blades. The rescue team was coming. But they had no idea that saving this bear wouldn't just mean freeing him from chains. It would mean unlocking decades of damage and forcing a reckoning with the people who did this. And somehow along the way, this dying bear would teach them what survival really means. The sound of the helicopter was like thunder in the mountains. It shattered the stillness of the forest, whipping tree branches in all directions. Maya shielded her eyes from the snow and dust as the bird settled into a nearby clearing just big enough to fit it. Out stepped Andrea Velasquez, a wildlife veterinarian with 20 years of field experience, followed by 3 park rangers carrying tranquilizer kits, bolt cutters, and trauma packs. One of them spotted the bear and immediately froze. That's a grizzly, and he's chained. The moment of disbelief didn't last long. Training kicked in, and then everything moved fast. Harlan hadn't moved much since sunrise. His breathing was shallower. His eyes were barely open. The tumor had started to ooze, the skin over it torn slightly from where he tried and failed to roll over. As the team approached, Liam stepped back and whispered, "Please don't let him die now." Dr. Velasquez approached slowly, one hand out, voice steady. "Hey, big guy, you've been waiting long enough." They tranquilized him quickly, carefully. The dart struck his back thigh. Harlan flinched but didn't cry out. Within minutes, his breathing evened, his massive body relaxing into the snow-covered dirt. Then came the hardest part, the chain. The rusted links had been wrapped around a steel collar embedded into the tree itself. Whoever had done this had come prepared to leave the animal to die, out of sight and out of conscience. It took 15 minutes to saw through the collar. When it finally dropped to the ground, everyone stood silent. The weight of that sound of the metal hitting earth felt like a funeral bell and a liberation in the same breath. They loaded Harlan onto a stretcher reinforced with steel rods. Even unconscious, he weighed over 700 pounds. Every movement had to be coordinated and slow. Maya didn't take her eyes off him. The moment his body disappeared into the belly of the chopper, something broke inside her. A mix of relief, grief, rage, and hope. She whispered, "You're going to make it." Back at the veterinary field station near Bellingham, the real fight began. X-rays confirmed what they feared. The tumor was malignant, advanced, pressing on his lungs. But Heron wasn't just sick. He was emaciated, anemic, and infected. His paw wound was septic. His teeth showed signs of muzzle trauma, likely from biting the chain. He had probably been there for weeks, maybe longer, and yet his heart was strong, still beating like he wanted to live. Dr. Velasquez turned to Maya that evening. "He has a slim chance, but it's a chance. He's the toughest animal I have ever seen. If he wants to fight, we fight with him." Maya nodded through tears. She looked at Heron, asleep, hooked to IVs, oxygen flowing into his nose, the tumor covered with gauze. Then we don't stop. We give him everything. Because sometimes survival isn't just instinct, it's a decision. And this bear, even broken, had already made it. The first night was silent, too silent. Harlan lay motionless on the concrete floor of the recovery bay, wrapped in warm blankets, his breathing shallow and labored. Machines beeped rhythmically around him, but every few hours a nurse would gently touch his massive paw and whisper, "Still with us, big guy?" By morning he hadn't moved, but his heart kept going. That was enough for now. Dr. Velasquez monitored the tumor closely. It was aggressive, wrapped around his ribs, invading muscle. Surgical removal would be dangerous. But the longer they waited, the lower his chances. The team debated. Some said it was kinder to put him down. He's a wild animal. He's already suffered more than any creature should. But Maya stood Hair ground. He stayed alive out there, alone, chained, in pain. He didn't give up, so we don't either. Day 3 brought the first sign of change. As Maya sat beside the glass window, sketching the scene in her notebook, Harlan's head lifted just barely and turned toward her. She froze. His one good eye blinked once, then again. He didn't growl, didn't flinch. He just looked at her like he remembered. That afternoon, he drank water on his own for the first time. On day 5, he shifted positions, grunting in pain, but managing to roll onto his uninjured side. It wasn't much, but to the team, it was everything. They started calling it the Harlan Miracle, and soon the story leaked. A volunteer posted a photo on social media, just a shadowed silhouette of Heron resting under warming lights with the caption, "He was left to die in chains with a tumor the size of a melon, but he's still fighting, so we are too." Within 24 hours, the post had over 400 likes. By the end of the week, the hashtag #HateHold on Harlan was trending globally. Donations poured in, letters arrived. Children sent drawings of bears with bandages and big hearts. One read, "Don't give up, you're my hero." By the end of the week, too, Harlan could stand. His tumor had shrunk slightly thanks to early radiation therapy. His eyes were clearer. His movements, though slow, were more deliberate. He still limped, still whimpered when touched too close to the wound. But he no longer looked like he was waiting to die. He looked like a creature that, after losing all faith in humans, was slowly beginning to trust again. Maya visited daily. She never spoke loudly. She never tried to touch him. She just sat, read aloud, sketched, wrote in her journal. Sometimes she'd whisper, "You're not alone anymore." And even when he didn't react, she believed he heard her. The team scheduled the surgery. It was risky, bleeding, shock, heart failure. Any of them could take him during the operation, but if they waited any longer, they'd lose him anyway. Heron stood at the edge of life again, and this time it would be his choice to cross that line or come back stronger. It was still dark. When Dr. Velasquez walked into the recovery room, the surgical team had already prepped the operating theater. The anesthesia machine hissed gently, and stainless steel instruments were lined up with precision and care. Heron lay quietly in his enclosure, unaware that today would be the most critical day of his life. Maya was already there. She hadn't gone home. She knelt beside the glass and whispered, like she always did, "You've made it this far, please. Just a little further." Then she turned and walked away, not wanting to say goodbye, but needing to just in case. At 7:03 a.m., Harlan was wheeled into the O. It took 5 grown men and a hydraulic table to move him. He looked peaceful under the sedative, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. His fur had been shaved around the tumor, revealing the angry red of the swollen mass, now nearly the size of a basketball. Dr. Velasquez took a breath. Let's begin. The surgery was expected to take 3 hours. It lasted nearly 7. Every layer of muscle revealed new complications: necrotic tissue, invasive blood vessels, hidden infections. At one point, Harlan's heart rate dropped so low that the anesthesiologist reached for the crash kit. "We're losing him," but Dr. Velasquez barked, "Not yet. Hang on, big guy." And somehow his heart steadied. By hour 5, the tumor was detached. It hit the tray with a heavy, sickening thud. No one spoke. It looked like a piece of death itself, twisted, bloody, and wrong. But it was out, gone. Now came the real danger, stopping the bleeding and closing him up without pushing his body into shock. The team worked in near silence. Only the soft beep of machines marked the time. When they placed the final suture, Dr. Velasquez stepped back and whispered, "Harlan, if you wake up from this, you're not just a survivor. You're a miracle." They moved him back into recovery, hooked him up to fluids, monitored every vital sign, and waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. 2. His breathing remained shallow, his pulse irregular. At one point, Maya walked in and placed her palm against the glass. Tears welled in her eyes. "Come back," she whispered. "Please come back." At 3:12 a.m., almost 18 hours after surgery began, Heron moved just slightly. His paw twitched, then his head rolled, his eyes opened, slow, dazed, unfocused, but they were open. Dr. Velasquez smiled for the first time in days. "Welcome back, big guy." The next 48 hours would still be dangerous, but Harlan had done what no one thought he could. He survived, and in doing so, he became more than a rescue case. He became a symbol of willpower, resilience, and the simple, painful, beautiful fact that life, even broken, even brutalized, still wants to go on. It was day 92, 3 months since Harlan had been found, chained and dying in a forgotten forest. His body bore the scars of everything he'd endured. The chain, the surgery, the infection. But his eyes were different now, clear, steady, alive. The team had debated for weeks whether he could return to the wild. His mobility had returned. Not perfect, but functional. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace. He could hunt, forage, defend himself. But the real question wasn't physical, it was psychological. Would he be able to survive alone again? Or had the trauma buried his instincts too deeply? Maya wasn't sure, but she knew this. Heron had never belonged to them, not to the center, not to the media, not to the movement he had sparked. He belonged to the trees, the rivers, the cold wind. "It's time," she said quietly. They chose a protected area in northern Montana, 300 acres of remote, mountainous terrain. No roads, no humans, just wilderness. Perfect. The night before transport, Maya visited him alone. He was awake in his enclosure, resting on his side, breathing slow and calm. The spot where his tumor once lived was now a patch of healing skin, pink and clean. She knelt beside the bars and placed her hand near him. He didn't move away. "You changed everything," she whispered. "You reminded us what it means to fight and what it means to let go." Her voice cracked. "I hope you find peace out there, but if you ever look back, I'll be here." She stood. Her hand rushed to the gate gently. He blinked once, then closed his eyes. The journey to the release site took 10 hours. Harlan remained calm the entire time, sedated only slightly to keep his stress low. He didn't thrash. He didn't panic. It was as if he knew, as if he remembered what freedom smelled like. The crate was lowered into the grass by helicopter. When the door opened, no one moved. Harlan stepped out slowly, the wind catching his thick fur. He looked around. He sniffed the air. Then, instead of running, he turned and looked back right at Maya, not in fear, not in confusion. Recognition. Her hand flew to her mouth. One long breath. Then Harlan turned away and walked into the trees, not limping, not looking back, just going home. That night, the stars above the valley seemed brighter than they had all year, and for the first time in her life, Maya didn't dream of saving animals. She dreamed of one being free. It was day 92, 3 months since Heron had been found, chained and dying in a forgotten forest. His body bore the scars of everything he'd endured, the chain, the surgery, the infection, but his eyes were different now, clear, steady, alive. The team had debated for weeks whether he could return to the wild. His mobility had returned, not perfect, but functional. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace. He could hunt, forage, defend himself. But the real question wasn't physical, it was psychological. Would he be able to survive alone again? Or had the trauma buried his instincts too deeply? Maya wasn't sure, but she knew this. Harlan had never belonged to them, not to the center, not to the media, not to the movement he had sparked. He belonged to the trees, the rivers, the cold wind. "It's time," she said quietly. They chose a protected area in northern Montana, 300 acres of remote, mountainous terrain. No roads, no humans, just wilderness. Perfect. The night before transport, Maya visited him alone. He was awake in his enclosure, resting on his side, breathing slow and calm. The spot where his tumor once lived was now a patch of healing skin, pink and clean. She knelt beside the bars and placed her hand near him. He didn't move away. "You changed everything," she whispered. "You reminded us what it means to fight and what it means to let go." Her voice cracked. "I hope you find peace out there, but if you ever look back, I'll be here." She stood. Her hand brushed the gate gently. He blinked once, then closed his eyes. The journey to the release site took 10 hours. Harlan remained calm the entire time, sedated only slightly to keep his stress low. He didn't thrash. He didn't panic. It was as if he knew, as if he remembered what freedom smelled like. The crate was lowered into the grass by helicopter. When the door opened, no one moved. Harlan stepped out slowly, the wind catching his thick fur. He looked around. He sniffed the air. Then, instead of running, He turned and looked back right at Maya. Not in fear, not in confusion. Recognition. Her hand flew to her mouth. One long breath, then Harlan turned away and walked into the trees. Not limping, not looking back, just going home. That night, the stars above the valley seemed brighter than they had all year, and for the first time in her life, Maya didn't dream of saving animals. She dreamed of one being free. It was just another chilly morning in a quiet mountain town until two young grizzly bears wandered onto the porch of a little girl's home. At first, everyone feared the worst, but what unfolded next wasn't an attack. It was something so pure, so unexpected, that even the most hardened hearts couldn't hold back their tears. This story will remind you sometimes the greatest acts of kindness come from those we least expect, and sometimes it's the smallest souls who carry the biggest courage. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. Your support helps us bring more inspiring, real-life stories like this to you. The first hint of trouble came with the crows. At 6 years old, Emily Grace Holloway was already an expert in the morning rituals of her little town. The clatter of mail trucks, the smell of wood smoke, and the noisy squabbling of the crows that nested in the pine trees. But that morning, something was different. The crows were silent. The sun hadn't yet cracked the rim of the distant mountains, and a thick mist blanketed the narrow, winding streets. Frost clung to the porch railings like tiny pearls. Inside the cabin, Emily sat cross-legged in front of the fireplace, cradling her favorite worn-out teddy bear, Captain, and drawing pictures with crayons. Her mother, Lydia, stirred quietly in the kitchen, brewing coffee and whispering about errands they needed to run later. Outside, something moved, something heavy enough to make the old boards of the porch creak under its weight. Emily lifted her head. She listened. Another creak closer this time. Captain slipped from her arms as she stood, tiny feet padding across the rough wood floor to the window that overlooked the porch. What she saw stole the breath from her lungs. Two young grizzly bears, not full-grown, but massive enough to make the heart of any adult freeze in fear. Their thick winter coats glistened with dew. One bear, slightly larger, with a silvery scar above his right eye, nudged the other, a smaller, rounder sibling, who clung closer to the railing, sniffing the splinters. They weren't roaring. They weren't pawing at the door. They were lost, confused, almost scared. Emily didn't scream, didn't run. She pressed her forehead gently against the window pane, her wide blue eyes meeting the brown, uncertain gaze of the smaller bear. Time stretched thin. The two young bears sat heavily on the porch, their enormous paws dangling over the edge like children on a dock. Emily reached out instinctively, placing her tiny palm flat against the cold glass. The smaller bear tilted his head, a mirror of her gesture, a connection so fragile, so impossibly tender, it felt like the world itself was holding its breath. Behind her, Lydia noticed the silence. "Emily," she called. When she turned the corner and saw what her daughter was staring at, her coffee cup shattered on the floor. "Emily, back away slowly now." Her voice was sharp but shaking. But Emily didn't move, and the bears didn't charge. They stayed still, watching, waiting. Lydia grabbed the phone with trembling hands and dialed the local ranger station. As the line rang, she couldn't tear her eyes away from the impossible sight on her front porch. Her daughter, face lit with wonder, separated from two grizzly bears by nothing more than a sheet of thin, frosted glass. And outside, in the creeping dawn light, something deeper than fear pulsed in the air. Something wild, something sacred, something that was about to change everything. The ranger's voice on the other end of the phone was calm but firm. "Keep all doors locked. Stay inside. Don't make sudden noises. We're dispatching a team now." Lydia barely managed to stammer a reply before setting the phone down, hands trembling. She rushed to Emily, pulling her gently but urgently away from the window. But Emily resisted. "They're not bad," she whispered, clutching Captain tightly against her chest. Lydia knelt in front of her, hands framing her daughter's tiny face. "Sweetheart, they're bears! They're dangerous! They could hurt you without meaning to!" Emily looked at her mother with a kind of calm certainty Lydia had never seen before. "They're scared, too." Outside, the two young grizzlies shifted nervously. The larger one, the one with the silver scar, rose to his feet, sniffing the air. His sibling wed softly, a low, mournful sound that vibrated through the boards of the porch. They weren't aggressive. They weren't searching for food. They looked lost, broken. By the time the first ranger truck pulled into the driveway, word had already spread. Neighbors peered from behind curtains. Phones recorded shaky videos. It wouldn't be long before social media caught fire. Grizzlies invade town. And with that, decisions would be made fast and without mercy. Decisions about tranquilizers, about relocation, or worse. Lydia's heart twisted at the thought. 2 rangers stepped out cautiously. Ranger Dean Marlowe led the way, a broad-shouldered man with gray stubble and sharp eyes that had seen too many messy encounters with wildlife. He surveyed the situation quickly. 2 adolescent bears, no mother in sight, unusual behavior, vulnerable humans inside. Protocol was clear. He lifted the tranquilizer rifle from the cab of his truck. Inside, Emily watched. She saw the dart gun. She saw the slow, heavy way the rangers moved, as if already preparing for the worst. Her small hands pressed against the glass again. The smaller bear saw her too, and for a heartbeat across all the chaos, their eyes locked once more. In those brown depths, Emily didn't see a threat. She saw a question, a silent plea. "Please, don't be afraid of me." Before Lydia could stop her, Emily ran to the door.